Right, everybody, break time is over, and we are into the afternoon session in day two from Albuquerque, New Mexico at the 2024 World Cup. We're going to be sticking with the Collins division for one more round, then moving into the North American focused WOW division, very, very close to the standard list used in North American play. Immediately after that for 3 games, and accordingly, I am joined by one of the fastest rising North American players on the circuit, Emmett Brasowski. Emmett, thank you very much for hopping aboard with me today.
Thank you for having me, Will. I'm very excited to be here. Sad I can't be in Albuquerque myself, but this is a very close second for me. I'm very excited to see what these fine players can do this afternoon.
Yeah, it always gives me a little bit of FOMO not being there for big events like this. At the same time, we did just have the extremely large Scrabble Players Championship just this past week. Always a tough decision to make with multiple extremely impressive and fun events on the calendar. But yeah, it's tough. You'd want to play everything, but there's a stamina component too, where, I happen to have COVID right now, but even if I didn't, the idea of playing 2 huge tournaments like this, one after the other, is a little daunting from a stamina perspective.
100%. I think, the most impressive people to me are those who have played all 3 quote unquote majors this summer, starting with the July 4th Albany tournament earlier this summer, then the SPC, and then now the World Cup. Truly some real Scrabble addicts that we have in the field. Now, I don't think either Geoff or Karl are either of those people, but I'm excited to see what their relative freshness is going to offer in this game.
Yeah, 2 veteran players in Geoff and Karl right now. Karl is at 4th overall in the standings to Geoff's 6th place. Neither of these 2 players have appeared on the stream to this point, which is why we wanted to showcase a high-ranking matchup between 2 players that have not been on stream. And yeah, both veteran players. Geoff, I feel like, it's going to be a little bit of a stylistic clash. Geoff Thevenot has extremely impressive word knowledge. He really is one of the few players in the North American scene where I could see him playing 9s, 10s, incredibly long words. I can think of one instance where Geoff bingoed out through OLE on the board with flageolets.
Wow.
To win a game. That's a game that I should probably track down and make a video about at some point. So Geoff is liable to put some fireworks out there on the board. And Karl, on the other hand, a very solid tactical player, a veteran of the North American dictionary, perhaps a slightly more recent convert to Collins play, but definitely a player that I myself have played a number of times, and I always feel like he is just a tough out from a strategic perspective. Very good close board player. So should be a nice stylistic contrast. I hope that both players get a chance to showcase their strengths in this game.
Yeah, I mean, naturally, both of these players are going to be near the top of the Scrabble pyramid, which is why, at least to me, Will, it's all the more surprising that, to my knowledge, as far as I was able to tell, they've never matched up in competitive tournament play under any of the Scrabble governing bodies. So it's going to be interesting to see how they react to each other's stylistic choices in this game.
That is surprising that these 2 players, I have to imagine that both of them have been in the scene for a couple decades, but right. Karl hailing from upstate New York, and Geoff, I know historically has spent a lot of time in Texas. I think he's, maybe somebody in the chat knows better, I believe he's still based in the Midwest right now. So maybe that's part of the reason why these 2 players haven't clashed over the board outside of these big events. That's why events like the World Cup are so fun, is you get a chance to play a bunch of players that you might not have as easy access to normally. So I assume that the announcements are still ongoing, but I know that if it's up to us, we're definitely ready. But I assume that there's still some procedural stuff going on on site. So yeah, Emmett, it's round 11 right here. We are not even, as of this round, we're not even a third of the way through this
Kind of
marathon event.
crazy.
What are players trying to think about as far as the stamina required to make it through this marathon?
I mean, look, I guess it's super cliche, but take it one game at a time. I remember back when I was first starting out, my coach, the indomitable Stefan Fatsis, used to tell me that I shouldn't worry about winning tournaments. I shouldn't even worry about winning games. I should just be worried about making the best play on every turn. So it's an important thing for these players to remember, especially when they're going to have the opportunity to play 250 or 300 turns of Scrabble. Probably more, actually, throughout this tournament.
Yeah, it is the best possible advice, but it is so much easier said than done because, of course, when we sit down to play, when we go to a tournament, you dream of winning the tournament. You sit down to play and you imagine how good it would be to win this game, but really, that is why we play so many games at a big Scrabble tournament like this. You cannot win every game, and it looks like maybe the clapping here indicating that the announcement's coming to a close. Otherwise, that was suspiciously in sync right there. So yeah, in any case, taking things one play at a time really is the best advice, but it is so much more difficult to actually embrace that mindset over the board.
Right.
So I actually think these are two very zen players. I can't remember ever seeing either of these two get animated over a loss. Or, I mean, Karl is really one of the most even keeled players I've ever played, and Geoff is right up there as well. So I'm not imagining that we're going to see too many boards getting flipped over, or rage quitting the game, spiking the rack of tiles on the table. Yeah, it should be all about the Scrabble here.
From a ratings perspective, though, Will, I think we both have to admit that a board flip would kind of be incredible. I mean, just think about the live stream fail benefits for that.
That would definitely make the rounds on Reddit. I have to imagine, seeing a major outburst over the board here, with one of the players flinging their rack of tiles across the room. That would definitely get some butts in the seats, but unfortunately, that is just not really within the ethos of tournament Scrabble. Most players are polite to a fault. Not each and every one of us. Scrabble is a very frustrating game at times. There is a luck element that can rear its head in devastating fashion from time to time, but I feel like all of us, I should say, are mostly aware that we're playing a word game here. It's not worth going too crazy over to that extent. But I love the viral ideas, Emmett. Do you have any other ways that we could make this go more viral?
Gosh, I mean, streaming the big board from a hot tub is something that I've thought about for quite some time. Kind of capitalizing on the now couple of years old Twitch trend, but man, other than that, I think it's just about getting some bigger names into these tournaments, or making the players who are already playing in these tournaments into big names, rather.
Yeah, that's something I'm really excited about. We get a lot of questions on this channel about where's Nigel Richards, right? When are we going to see Nigel? I really am excited for the first big stream that features Nigel Richards and that we can promote properly. I'm really excited to see what kind of a number that pulls now that we've gotten a little bit more mainstream knowledge of that incredible bearded genius that we love to talk about in our community. There's definitely other amazing players that are, fascinating to watch. I would say that, I recently played a match with the current, not the top player, but the number two player in the standings in the Collins division, Wellington Jiggeray. I played a match with Wellington that didn't have anything on the line except just it was like a match that was organized by Let's Play Scrabble.com's mastermind, Josh Greenway, and it almost hit 700 viewers just because it was two players that people might have known slightly more than usual. So I feel like there's some potential there. If you would just get Nigel in the mix, now you're really cooking with gas. So hopefully we can get him out at some point to one of these events.
The clickbait potential would certainly be through the roof. A reasonable clickbait, however. But, I think one thing that we have going for us is that our recent, at least North American Scrabble championships have both gone to players who are also pretty large in the online Scrabble scene. I think both Josh Sokol and Mac Meller, the last two NWL North American champions, are two of the biggest Scrabble content creators out there. So I think that's also been a plus for our discovery as an online community. But it looks like the players are about to bag. So, we might
at long last, here we go. But you really couldn't have scripted it any better, Emmett, to have Josh and then Mac win this year. That was pretty incredible to watch.
Yeah. Kind of a maybe Big Scrabble is fixing something situation. But,
yeah, a good comment that we do have Nigel playing in this tournament. We actually did see a great game by not that Nigel Peltier, playing a pretty entertaining game earlier in this tournament. In any normal world, Nigel Peltier would be the Nigel within a competitive scene. He's just unfortunate that we have the guy with the beard. So in any case, we are underway now. Geoff going first in this game with a bunch of vowels and a K. He does not have a bingo here, but this is a classic choice, Emmett, between will Geoff want to play a longer word with the K, or is he going to try to keep it short with something like koi or koa and go harder for a bingo? These are tough turns to figure out.
Yeah. I mean, I think my NWL brain on this play would be drawn to something like Kori, which Geoff has set up. Scoring almost 30 points, leaving yourself with a superb leave of ES. But I think it's possible. Yeah, I think Kori seems like the optimal play to me, but something like koi is certainly defendable, leaving the better leave of AERS.
Yeah, I think the point deficit between Kori, which scores 28, and one of the shorter plays, which would only score 14. Ideally, you'd want to play something like koi, as you suggested. Those two plays are 14 points apart, and that feels exactly right to account for the increased frequency in bingos that you get after playing shorter, keeping 4 good bingo tiles instead of 2. But it's not going to matter as Geoff draws so well after his 5-tile play, including that blank. Doesn't even matter that he's drawn a V. He is definitely bingoing next turn. It's hard to imagine how Karl could prevent it. So a great start in the making here for Geoff.
Yeah, I mean, whether Karl plays something horizontally, maybe with some overlaps like Bay, or something like Yagi, I think he's still going to give a spot. Exactly. So Bay comes down, and Geoff is going to have plays. Maybe there's a 9 that I'm not seeing, but he's definitely going to have plays paralleling Kori, maybe with some Collins only YA3.
Yeah, if there is a 9, I like Geoff's chance of seeing it because, again, I mentioned it pregame that he really does have excellent word knowledge of words longer than the norm, 9s, 10s, things like that. He's got all of that in his memory banks, which is a rarity among players. Even at this level, we usually stick to words 8 letters or less because we have 7 tiles on the rack. It's not really that useful much of the time to know words any longer than that. But some players, I think of it as being a little bit sicko to memorize 9 and 10 letter words, but actually those words are often beautiful and fun to learn for on their own merits. It's not really about improving your Scrabble game necessarily. It's just because they're kind of fun to know. So players will sometimes go on that journey of learning those long words just for the enjoyment. And if it ever happens to every now and then help your Scrabble game a little bit, that's just a bonus.
Yeah. And it seems like Geoff is scanning for those 9-letter words, but assuming he doesn't find one, which we in the booth can tell he probably will not, given that there are no valid words, is this is going to be an interesting look into Geoff's strategic decision making in this game, as he's got a number of quite high scoring plays that stick a easy to use letter, an R, a D, into the A column, the triple lane. But he also has some slightly less high scoring plays that really shut this board down, underlapping Korai 5 times, in fact. So we'll see if he's able to find any of those.
Yeah, so I think you're talking about plays like Vayner's, something like that, which makes the Collins hook to bow of bon. I guess I'm giving that maybe too French of a pronunciation, but either way, this play scores 83 with all those overlaps. No, you don't get the V on this square the way you would if you played Revisor or Revises in this spot, but for a cost of only 2 points less, you're avoiding opening this triple back to Karl. So I think it's well worth taking a smaller score, as you suggest, Emmett. So really, from Geoff's POV, he's just got to be, I'm sure he's at least thinking about, what do I have here? Do I have any way of doing something with a V here? Almost certainly not. The hooks to right to Ya don't really line up that well for it. So I do expect him to come back around and find one of these overlapping plays.
Yeah, and the chat points out a few nines, at least arrestive, maybe carveries. I'm not sure of the validity of that word. But those are significantly worse from a scoring perspective than Geoff's top options, like Vayner's, like Divisor or Revisor, putting the blank D or R in the triple lane. The other interesting factor to consider is that looking at Karl's rack, he's got his own 7-letter word lined up, but many of Geoff's top options are going to sew the board up in a way that isn't going to let Karl bingo back.
It's actually very difficult to imagine what Geoff could play that lets Karl bingo. And yes,
Agreed.
You're right. Maybe if you're in the chat and you're saying, what the heck does Karl have? Actually, G-hours is a valid word. That is a word in the Scrabble dictionary, the way he has it spelled out right there. So as weird as that looks, that is a valid word, but it doesn't play on the current board. And as long as Geoff doesn't create a new space on the board for Karl to play it, Karl's going to have a much more difficult decision doing that classic horrible Scrabble act of having a 7-letter word on your rack that does not play and having to break it up because you got to play something. Always painful, Emmett, when that happens.
Yeah, I'm having a very interesting time thinking about, wow, okay, this is a pretty interesting decision, Will. To me, this seems like a mistake. What do you think?
Yeah, it looks like maybe he's just not considered some of the options that play underneath Korai, which is, that is the type of play that I miss the most frequently. A lot of these plays that make a ton of parallel plays are the toughest to spot. Instead, erosive for about 10 fewer points on top. It looks like they're just verifying the score. So no big deal here. That wasn't a challenge. But yeah, either way, even this bingo does not give Karl a place to play his own word of G-hours. So it could be worse from Geoff's standpoint. He could have picked something that gave Karl a place to bingo. Even though Geoff's left a couple points on the table, he still is in the driver's seat here.
It's very true. Although I think thinking about how the board would have developed after something like Vayner's is very interesting, because then Geoff is up by more than he is now. He's up by something like 85 with a board that is very, very difficult to play on, really to open anything for any number of points. There would have been some stuff maybe hooking the BON for Ebon, but yeah, it is an interesting counterfactual to think about. But to the game at hand, I think, again, we're also going to see Karl try to play through what's now a rack that actually isn't that good, which is kind of the annoying thing about a lot of these high probability bingo racks, is that if you can't bingo with them, they're really not all that good. So he's got the G, he's got the O, he's got the U in this rack, which are generally regarded as pretty bad tiles. So
Yeah.
I expect we'll see something that drops 2 or 3 of those tiles.
Yeah, all very true. To my eye, the two plays that Karl is likely to be considering here, I'm sure he's just looking around for hooks, maybe. It's really tough to admit defeat that this bingo, which would save you, isn't available. And this is one of the two plays that I really like from Karl's perspective. It gets rid of all of the clunkiest letters off of his rack, and it sets up an S hook that is a little bit easier to use. The only other play I saw that was worth at least brief consideration to me would be the Collins only word of Geo right here. The thing that's especially nice about that is you would be setting up your A as a hook, and you would be holding an A in reserve. So a couple good things about that play, but I really don't quibble with vigor here from Karl's perspective at all.
Yeah, I mean, he gets to drop the U with this play, which I think is quite important for his future chances of bingo. And although we can see, at least to my uneducated North American NWL eyes, I don't quite see anything on his rack. But yeah, we'll see what Geoff decides to do. And that is a word that I'm familiar with, thankfully. And it looks to be one of his best options.
Yeah, Copen is a good idea. The thing that I like about it is that because Geoff had so many consonants, he wasn't going to be able to use this G to the triple very effectively. So the nice thing about Copen, it obstructs that spot so that Karl cannot use it, and it doesn't really give that much back on the board. Yes, you now have a C that you can play through, and you have a line here, but those are pretty marginal spots. You've done a really nice job, if you're Geoff, of limiting the damage that Karl can do to this triple. I don't think Karl had anything that good, but he had an H, and there are some words that start with GH that go across that now will not play. That being said, in the Collins dictionary, the H is going to hit a little bit harder here. So I'm curious if he's just going to go with an overlapping play like HOI, maybe Ahi. But I think, yeah, now Karl, even better. So he's really gotten rid of a bunch of vowels with this play, which makes a lot of sense. Let me update the scores here.
Yeah, I think, the analyzer may like something like HOI slightly better, as it really values the A, but this is a pretty robust leave in that Karl has a lot fewer draws where he draws way too many vowels, and his rack is swamped. It's a lot easier to draw 3 vowels than it is to draw 4.
There is a play available here that is arguably not even the best play. I think given Geoff's consonant overload, something like thud in this spot, amazingly, is likely to be about the best that he has to offer. But there is a hilarious play that I'm kind of hoping he sees just for flash. Unearthly
Wow.
through EAR. What a way that would be to get a bunch of points for your H on the triple letter score, I should say, and really burning through all of Geoff's tiles except that D. He would be that would be hilarious. I don't know who would find that. Certainly not me over the board. But my fingers are crossed that he comes up with that.
I mean, look, we talk about this concept of forking the boards in Scrabble, which is where you make a play that opens 2 different sections of the board that are unblockable with a single move. I think Unearthly would be one of the greatest and least blockable forks I think I've ever seen. As the player leading currently, I'm not sure if that's something Geoff wants to do. He's going to have a lot more control after thud.
Yeah, that's fair. That's true. So something right here doesn't really open anything back to Karl whatsoever. If you go only this far with your word, you can't even play bingos through there. The K of Karai cuts it off. So yeah, is it style over substance? Maybe, but you got to remember, having a little bit of style and panache on the stream can pay dividends if
It's
you're,
true.
if your opponent knows that you're going to find plays like unearthly, could be a little intimidating. All right,
Yeah,
this is a very normal play in response, Bothy. I actually like
very
this better,
normal.
Emmett, from a board control standpoint.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, you're cutting out all of those underlaps on Korai. You're not allowing Karl to open up the top left quadrant of the board with a single play, which he might have been able to do after something like Dooley. He could have played through the D, which might have forked the board. So yeah, this is certainly a very passable play from Geoff. A good play.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that I like especially about it is, when you're evaluating threats on a board, one of the biggest in most situations is where would my opponent end a bingo with an S on the board? And I feel like Vigors jumps out as a place that if Karl had a bingo ending in S, he would be wanting to play right there. That is what Bothy accomplishes, is blocking those 7-letter words ending in S. You can't quite reach all the way now. Not only that,
Right.
the R here is a very, very popular letter to end 8-letter words, and now the Y is in the way of words like that. So Bothy does have some major benefits in that regard. In addition to what you said, it prevents, playing something like Thud in this spot would have allowed Karl to overlap and open a third lane at the top of the board. Instead, Karl's going to make a nice play here of Seal for 27. That is basically the most points that he can get here without using his S. And this is a really clever decision on his part. He has an
Mhm.
S and he's just greatly increased its value. Not only that, both Ys on the board, Emmett. So the danger of that hook is much less. Well, it's none.
Right. Yeah. I mean, look, prior to that, I think the only way Karl is scoring something with his S is if he plays, a bingo hooking vigor with the S not in seventh position. But now he's got a few more opportunities. The S bingos are going to fit in a lot more positions. And he does draw reasonable draw to his S, including the mug being the second blank. So
Yeah, great draw for Karl to pick up that blank here. It's not immediately clear to me if he will have a play with the S hook that he just created, but I do feel like slewing. He'll be able to play slewing or swingle at the very least. So it's going to be difficult for Geoff to figure out a way to block that very nice, calculatedly aggressive play of Karl. I'm curious if Geoff will feel inclined to just drop his V here. Is he going
yeah.
to care enough? The only reason you would do this, just plopping your V down to Chiv, the Collins only 4-letter word, is you would only do that if you felt like your other 6 letters here are strong enough to warrant it. And maybe they're good enough that potentially you'll get some bingos with it. I'm not so sure. I don't think I would be playing Chiv here. I think that's a major instance of, armchair quarterbacking by us in the booth.
Yeah, I mean, it's if the players were playing open face with their racks available to the other players, I think Chiv is certainly good enough. The leave after that is certainly good enough. But without that
Oh,
knowledge,
look
what
at
do you think
that
about
play.
keeping the
I
E
love
on the
that.
end? Yeah,
The
stops any
E,
hooks.
yeah, this is really clever by Geoff.
So clever.
Normally, you would want to keep your E much of the time. Admittedly, it does score 3 more points placing it on the
Right.
triple word score, but playing it, Emmett, you reacted to it when
Wow.
Geoff made that move.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, look, like what this does is, first of all, it means that you're not playing an E or an S at the end of uvula. But also, if you look at it from a board geometry perspective, now there's only 6 spots down from the oil spot. So Karl can't play anything like slewing now because he's going to be running into uvula G, which, isn't a word, even in Collins.
True. That's a great block. It forces Karl. I'm pretty sure that Karl had his tiles arranged in one of the few ways that's still going to allow him to play a bingo after this really nice defensive play of uvula. And that way would be wigless right here, slotting the G on the double letter score and pluralizing vigors going across. I'm almost sure that Karl saw that at one point. That is a word that if you're given those letters when you're training to study the Scrabble dictionary, you're probably going to guess wigless every time. But will you be able to recall the validity of that word in the game? That's the real question. I think Karl likely would be willing to pull the trigger on wigless here, but it's not 100%. It is the sort of word that you could easily see a player chicken out of.
Yeah, and I mean, look, what they say about those high probability bingo or the low probability bingos, pardon me, is that they're easier to spot but harder to pull the trigger on, because I mean, maybe wigless is a word, but especially in this 5-point challenge, it's going to get a challenge almost every time if it's bad. So you don't really get that added equity from potentially playing a fake word and having it stay on the board.
Yeah, that's totally true. So it also looked very briefly like Karl had set his letters up to play another valid Collins only bingo of sweeling through this A. That is another playable word that he could end up playing here. Just want to point out that that would make a really tricky situation if sweeling were to be Karl's play. That does actually hook with an S. So that would create a word knowledge check for both players. Do they know the S hook on that word? So a lot to be decided here by Karl's next choice. I think we would want him to play wigless right here, but it is very normal. It would be a very human thing if he just couldn't pull the trigger on it. So we're going to see what he does.
Yeah, and look, well, I mean, if he doesn't end up playing a bingo on this turn, it's not necessarily the end of the world. Holding the blank, missing a bingo is a lot less harmful than missing a bingo natural, as we call it, when you have a bingo without using the blank. But just from a pace perspective, it's definitely preferable for Karl to get a bingo down on this turn, especially such a high scoring one as wigless. Hooking vigors for something like 80, 85.
It's perfect. 85 points right here. Not opening really anything that scary back to Geoff. It gives Karl a little more time to get his rack in order for his next bingo, wherever that's going to be, assuming he's going to want to get, more than one to really seize command of this game. But yeah, 85 points right here is tough to turn down, given that, this score line is such that passing up a bingo here for a smaller score, you just don't know. And look at that. He's going back to wigless. And it's tough, right? Words like this, pulling the trigger. Yeah. I'm betting that he will go ahead and play this here. It looks like he's getting ready. But to your point, Emmett, he can expect that if Geoff has any doubt, he is going to challenge that word because of, as you mentioned, the much more lenient challenge rule that's used in Collins play. So, man, I worry a little about the amount of time that Karl's taking. I know that currently Geoff is behind on the clock compared to what Karl has, but this is definitely a lot of time that Karl has sunk in here.
Yeah, both of these players have taken a lot of time on their blank turns, which if you're going to take, a lot of time on a turn, it's probably best that it's on either an endgame turn or a turn where you're holding the blank, as those are the turns when players are most likely to make significant mistakes. But it looks like Karl is placing down wigs. Wow. So he hasn't found the bingos. It was pointed out in the chat that he had the NWL also bingo of Weigelas, Weigelas, through this E in uvula. And as it was pointed out in chat, I agree. I think he very likely saw that one, but it's it scores little enough that it's possible he decided to forgo bingoing there. Yeah, interesting. And Geoff plays very quickly.
Yeah, Geoff taking advantage of the fact that he has a pretty clear top scoring play here. Of course, there were some other options for him to consider. I mean, this new spot, for example, he could have played the Collins only Budo in that spot. But either way, Abound scoring a little bit better than that. It's hard to quibble with that as a really strong play for him here. But Karl, leaving ELS blank, draws SQU, which is an absolutely monstrous draw.
Yeah.
It's going to be difficult, but not impossible for him to play a bingo here. This is going to be, as I mentioned before, a bit of a word knowledge check of how much Collins does Karl know. Does he know the Collins only anagram to squeals here, or is he going to be forced to come up with something else? Lasks is, as it's been pointed out in the chat, will go down here, hooking Vigors for 93 points. I'm not sure if he's going to see it. That's a tough one, especially as a more recent convert to Collins.
Yeah. I mean, again, yeah, big word knowledge check here. It'll be interesting to see what he plays if he doesn't find that. It looked like at one point he had set up just QUA somewhere. I think maybe just SUQ hooking Vigor would be okay. It cuts off one of the bingo lanes, but Geoff just opened a number of floaters with his play of Abound, so maybe it's not the worst idea in the world.
Look at Geoff's rack of Exonery, which is hilarious because it actually does barely just fit through this E, but this is a big swing now. If Karl doesn't play Lasks, which will block Exonery, he can still block it by playing Souk, which looks like a pretty decent play in a vacuum already to score 35 points, leaving your blank for next turn. Either of those plays will block Exonery, but if Karl goes a different direction anywhere else, like if he were to play Souk here for some reason, maybe he doesn't want to create the big I overlapping spot that you could get hit with here. He's going to get hit with Exonery. The crazy thing about that, though, is the gargantuan S hook that this will create. So there are a lot of fireworks potentially coming in this game. Either Karl's going to bingo and score a bunch of points, or maybe we're about to see a nice bingo by Geoff followed by something even crazier from Karl.
Yeah, I mean, look, okay, so what's he going to play? Wow, that is not a word.
Ooh, I'm going to guess that he's making this blank an H. So he's going for it here. This is not a valid word. Geoff Thevenot is going to be challenging this every time. There's no way he's letting this stay on the board unless it were to have given him, if this word put an E right here, maybe Geoff lets it stay. Oh, he definitely lets it stay then. But Emmett, sorry to cut you off there. What are you thinking?
I mean, this is going to make Geoff's or Karl's next turn. Geoff's next turn incredibly interesting, because now he sees that Karl will be able to play squeals or sequels or anything, hooking Exonery if he plays that word. And I think sequels would put the Q on the triple letter score. So I don't think Karl can play, or Geoff can play Exonery here.
Great point. These situations are so complicated. These are the moves that can take a while. Look for Geoff. This is a critical situation because this is going to take some time for Geoff to puzzle out. Even though he's ahead on the clock right now, I could see this next move taking some time. You're absolutely right, Emmett. Playing Exonery right now is almost a non-starter because sequels coming down would be absolutely gargantuan in response. That would be an 152-point
Holy cow.
counterplay. There's no way that Geoff can actually move on and play his bingo here. He's going to
Yeah.
have to come up with something else, which is hilarious. But in a way, Geoff should be happy. He's dodged a huge bullet with Karl playing a phony instead of a valid word. So it's definitely a good thing for Geoff. Even though his
Yeah.
bingo is not going to play, it's going to let him seize even stronger command of this game.
But now, I mean, in poker they talk about putting somebody in the blender, which is when you make a move that is going to make somebody have to think for a while. This is going to be a thinking turn for Geoff. I predict. It's the turns where you have perfect information that are the hardest turns, endgame turns, and turns like this after you've just challenged off a phony bingo. So I expect Geoff to take his time here to make sure that he's making a good play, but specifically a play that doesn't give Karl back an easy bingo.
Yeah, I'm looking it over, and I feel like maybe a simple option is to just play Exode right here through the open D. I think the
Yeah.
thing that I like about this is it doesn't look like it gives anything new back to Karl. It still forces him to find lasks, I believe, if he wants to bingo. And the nice thing about it is that Karl has a blank. So dealing with this triple lane now while you have a reasonable play that does so, you don't want him using that blank to span 2 triple word scores here. So you've got the way to block it while you still can. So seems like a reasonable play to make from Geoff's point of view. But yeah, you can see he's definitely come to grips immediately with the fact that he can't just go ahead and bingo, which that is, breaking a cardinal rule of Scrabble. Normally, you've got a bingo, you're going to want to play it. So good job to him for clearly figuring that out quickly. And just doing the absolutely right thing. I'm curious to see what exactly he does play here. Maybe he's going to play X'd, which is a very similar idea.
Yeah, X'd comes down. I think it would have been interesting to see if Geoff took the time to find Karl's only playable bingo and block it. But I like to say that misses are also recursive in the game of Scrabble. So after Karl doesn't find lasks the first time, the chances of him finding it the second time are quite diminished.
And a very similar rack of exoneree kind of on Geoff's rack there, but he's traded out 2 E's and an X for 2 E's and an S, which is not so bad. He'll take that in a heartbeat. But yeah, back to Karl. Not sure where he'll go from here. Maybe now is the time to play Souk if he's not going to. Oh, look at that. He sees lasks after all.
Wow.
That's surprising. I did not expect that.
I'm surprised, but I'm also not convinced that he's going to be able to play this, especially a turn after already losing a turn.
Yeah, this is going to be very impressive for Karl to shake off that last attempt if he goes ahead and plays this word, which maybe he's not that sure of. Admittedly, the game situation is getting a little bit out of hand but the psychology of it is just so rough, having already lost a challenge. Remember, you're on stream. We're all human beings. There's a little bit of extra nerves and tension that goes into being on stream. So I could definitely see Karl. It looks like he for sure spotted the possibility of lasks, but we'll just see if he's able to pull the trigger on that.
Yeah. My gut says no. I'm going to be honest, Will, but
yeah,
we'll see if Karl surprises me. Something interesting that's come up in the chat is that after Karl's phony bingo of Quelches, Geoff had the opportunity to still play exoneree through the second E. So it's possible, worth thinking from his perspective, maybe that that he should let Karl burn the blank for not that many points and then play his own comeback bingo through that E situation.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, the board after this is absolutely insane. If you imagine Quelch's being on the board, then Exoneree going through this E. I assume it would be this way. Maybe you could play it one further out from here. But
Putting the
either
X.
way, yeah, I mean, the reason that you would put the X here is just that there's already a Q right here. So you would
Oh,
want
right.
there to
That's
be
so
this
true.
insane volatility so that if you just draw something flexible on your next turn, you're going to have your pick of really insane plays. But I feel like that could go awry for you with one really rough draw that doesn't give
Yeah,
you any good plays in those spots. Maybe now you're looking at giving your opponent access to two of those good scoring spots in one move. So
that
there
would
is
have
a
been
downside risk there too.
it would have been unbelievable to see, honestly. But
Yeah.
I think, look, the chaos that we've seen unfold over the past two turns just show how game changing the play of Uvula was from Geoff. I mean,
Yeah.
without that, we see slewing come down, and we're in a pretty standard position. But now we've got all these sorts of things to think about.
That's a great point. Uvula was an excellent job by Geoff to respond to this play of Seal by Karl, realizing that he almost certainly is making this play. Well, not always, but often you're doing this to ratchet up the value of your S going down. So I love that play. And yes, it is true. Karl had Wigless, which we think he saw and decided not to play. Look at this. Nicely done. Let's just see what he makes the blank. He has to make it an A. I think he's going to. And Geoff is looking skyward as if to say, man, I messed up. And it looks like Karl will make this an A.
Good for
Nicely
Karl.
done by him. Geoff might challenge this just to be absolutely sure, but Karl's going to get the good news that his instinct is actually correct here.
Yeah,
That is a valid word. I'm impressed, Emmett, that he pulled the trigger there.
I'm very impressed. It's possible that he identified that his only way back into this game is if um, that word was actually good. So, if the word is bad or if he doesn't bingo on this turn, he's going into another turn down more than 100 points, giving Geoff the opportunity to further control the board. So it's
Geoff's
possible he pulled the trigger on it.
his body language is as if he had just made a horrible mistake, but I really don't think he did at all. I think it was very, very natural from his position to assume, even if he did see Lasks, that it would be missed a second time. It looks like Geoff is hopefully he can avoid feeling too negative about that because it was going to be not that easy for him to block that area anyway. So, I guess it was possible, but in this particular scenario, I really don't hold it against him for not making some kind of small blocking play there.
Yeah, I didn't see. I mean, maybe just playing Lex down from the L and Uvula, but his reaction did indicate to me that he didn't see the play of Lasks, which is totally reasonable. I mean, you're
Right.
making your own 40-point play. He didn't bingo on the last turn. You have a fine reason to believe he's not going to do it this time.
Yeah. And note the clocks. This is definitely getting into scramble territory. I really think there are going to be a number of complicated turns still to come in this game, and both players are quite low to their, in their defense. There have been a lot of very tricky decisions in this game for both players to tangle with. But yeah, I'm worried for both of them with the clock. Geoff has to be happy though because he has the last S on his rack here, which is going to make it basically that this spot with oils is kind of his and his alone for the most part. It's going to be very, very difficult for Karl to do that much to obstruct it. Maybe a play on top of Uvula, like a Z play there might get the job done. But other than that, that S is pretty strong here. And we see a nice play by Geoff. This is a good recognition, Emmett, as Karl challenges this word of Ren.
Because it's not an NWL.
It's not, yeah, but look at this ratio. So the vowel
Oh, very
consonant
true.
ratio makes the idea that Geoff has here of using more consonants make a lot of sense.
Yeah, I was going to to wonder a little bit about why maybe Geoff doesn't play something like Neon, just Neon, leaving EERS, which is a very strong bingo leave. But playing off an extra consonant does leave that better vowel consonant balance. In the case where Geoff, I mean, it turns out not to matter as he redraws the R, but yeah. So that seems like a very insightful play from Geoff.
Yeah, I got to make sure I give Geoff his extra 5 points, and you can see Meteors finding its way onto Geoff's rack. The only question, where exactly is that going to fit here? Always nice to have the word on your rack, but yeah, not sure. But here's something crazy. If Karl goes ahead and plays Fano right here, which looks like a very reasonable play, that's going to give Geoff Fretsum off of this F, which is going to blow the game completely open in Geoff's favor. So, yeah.
He also already has, I believe, remotes hooking the wig with the T to make twig in that spot.
Oh, very nice. Got it.
So,
yeah, makes sense.
We'll see if he sees that. It seems like he has just seen that. So
there we go. Yeah,
it looks like Geoff is likely to bingo on the next turn.
Yeah, it's going to get even worse for him here, for Karl, that is, as long as Geoff can pause for a moment. Now he's going to have overlaps right here, but he's got something even better off of that F. So very fortuitous situation for Geoff, but I have to say he really earned it with his previous play. Look at, wow, that is lightning fast, Emmett.
Yeah. Look, I think super interesting spot here, Will. After the play of a Motors, also for 89 with 4 overlaps, there's kind of no place to bingo on this board anymore. And right now, Karl does have a spot over Fano. So it's possible that it was worth thinking about this for a little bit longer. But I mean, playing a 90-point bingo is going to win you the game a lot of the time in this position.
Yeah, I mean, hard to even think about a play like that, possibly scoring as much as a triple bingo down from the F, but in Motors scoring exactly the same, 89 points. And as you suggest, it really sews up the board. Yeah, technically, I guess you could worry about triples through EF, but those are very, very unlikely. I would be, you're just not likely to experience that very often. So makes a lot of sense, but still hard to quibble too much with Fretsum here, putting Karl in a world of hurt after he had just revived his winning chances a bit with coming back with Lasks there a couple turns back.
Yeah, look, it's going to be interesting to see how Karl decides to impact the board on this turn. I think he may want to open up another spot to bingo, given that it'll be relatively simple for Geoff to block up this top spot on the next turn, but I don't really see an easy or effective way for him to do that.
Yeah, neither do I. This is a grim scenario for sure. A lot of the most, the higher scoring plays on offer are in this overlapping spot where a Motors would have played, but this is Karl's lifeline that he cannot take off the board. He has to keep that on and hope that Geoff doesn't have anything good. We see that Geoff actually has great tiles to overlap up here and hammer the spot. He could play his Z here, but equally he could just play something like Taj up here or Jam or any combination of J overlaps in this spot. I guess Karl could play, using the Collins text, he could play Tauted at the bottom of the board. That at least opens something here, even though it's pretty weak.
ZE is valid in Collins, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
So it looks like that's going to get hit pretty hard on this turn.
Oh my God, yeah. So this could be a nice idea by Karl to try to draw the Z himself.
Totally.
But yeah, he's taking a crack at it. But yeah, it's going to get hit very, very hard immediately. I think Geoff doesn't have much to think about here.
Yeah, Za for 64, and it's going to be pretty difficult for Karl to make his way back in this one.
Well, yeah, it's not, it's never over till it's over. I agree that things looking pretty grim for Karl. Let me make sure I give him his points for that last play there. but Za comes down, and Jeff's doing a good job of playing quickly. I think Geoff had like 8 minutes a couple turns ago, but he's made his last couple of moves very, very fast, and he's in a commanding position for sure in this game now.
Yeah, I think for the rest of the time, Karl is probably mostly thinking about how does he minimize the spread in this game and stay over time. I think something like PWN is pretty good here. It just scores highly, leaves a relatively flexible leave.
Yeah, he sees it there clearly.
Yeah. So we'll see if that comes down. I think it should come down pretty quickly, and it does.
Yeah. Which is, to your point, from Karl's POV, he just wants to sort of play as accurately as possible through to the end of the game, make sure that he minimizes his loss. The reason for that, these numbers that you see after the player's records are the tiebreakers. If you have the same number of wins as somebody else, your margin of victory breaks the tie between players with equal numbers of wins. So you're always trying to win by as much as possible and lose by as little as possible. So it's never fun when you're finding yourself down over 100 points in a game to focus on minimizing your margin of defeat. But that is a part of the game at this level.
Yeah, I mean, look, you want to play the best turn, the best play on every turn, which includes turns where you're up by 200, and it also includes turns where you're down by 200, though it is way more difficult to stay focused in those games where you're already down by a 2 bingo score.
Yeah, for sure. So nice play there. The nice thing about Za from Geoff's perspective is that he was able to know that in all likelihood he would have this J spot left over for next turn. So target allowed him to dump his Z and potentially draw the vowels he needed to hit the J as well. That is how it's worked out. And Geoff draws another D from the bag. It looks like the D is coming out late with Geoff holding 2 and Karl holding another. And as you said, Emmett, Karl's just going to try to get through to the end of this game without going overtime. Playing Foyne for 34 looks all right to me.
Yeah, it looks fine to me. He's leaving himself with at least 1 out on the next turn that I see, at least 2 outs. So he's going to go out on the next turn with either add it or edit or whatever Collins fours I'm not familiar with.
Yeah. Suggestion also of maybe Karl could have played info right here. That would have been pretty cool with Chi and a bunch of overlaps right there. Another possibility for him. That looks pretty good because, I don't know. Then you can actually play DIT right here to follow up if you're Karl. Ooh. But either way, these sequences are purely academic. Did for Geoff up at the top part of the board looks good, and Karl is going to go out. I don't know if Karl's going to have the confidence in the D hook here of Rend to play Tid and Rend. I think as an NWL player, he will be likelier to know these 2 words, not as many points, but both words that Karl will for sure have seen before. So let's see what he chooses with his time ticking away here. There it goes, the more natural play for 14 points, ending the game. And wow, that was a pretty interesting one, Emmett.
Yeah, I mean, it ended up being pretty lopsided, but we had some very, very interesting positions that I think are worth reviewing.
Maybe we can come into the board now and hear their discussion.
Let's do it.
Oh, no, I think I was the only one. Yeah, I was thinking, I was trying to block things, and I couldn't see anything here or whatever. And I was like, well, and funny thing is, I had Exoneree, but it would have given you sequels for like 140 something. So I couldn't play it.
So sure, Quelch.
Yeah, with a C it's good. No. Quelches. Yeah, that's good. So,
something with the Z.
Yeah, with
I needed to
make
up a lot of points.
Yeah, you need that plus a bingo or something, and the board was pretty exhausted by that point.
You go there, you set up a triple for my Z.
Yeah.
This when you play this, I had GIA-OURS. GIA-OURS.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Which play here. But
Mm-hmm. Actually, that didn't take an ounce, does it?
I thought it did. I don't remember what else it was.
No, it doesn't.
Okay. Well, thanks for laughing.
Oh, yeah, I got a few. Round 11?
Yeah.
All right, I think the players are maybe done talking about that game, but we just got a couple big tidbits there, Emmett, if you heard. So, yeah, Karl he said, I was sure Quelch's was good with that S, but of course he's confusing it with the same word with a C is valid in the Collins lexicon. And then he told us that this is even crazier. Erosive blocked this hook on Korai. So Korai itself is a plural. It doesn't take an S as a hook, but the plays we were suggesting, like Vayner's, would have left this S hook open. So it would have been additional benefit for Geoff, because it sounds like Karl was getting ready to pluralize or play the phony S hook on Korai. So we would have seen even more craziness in this game. So a lot of back and forth. Yeah, he said, well, thanks for blocking me, which is kind of a funny, sardonic comment from Karl. So, wow, that was a crazy one. And it could have been potentially even crazier. So, so that'll do it for this game. I think what we're going to do now is take a quick break, and we're going to cut back and now finally switch over to the WoW division, where we're going to have a matchup of the player who was in first place going into lunch break, Rafi Stern, and a repeat appearance from the number 3 player in the standings at that time, former school Scrabble champion, Zach Ansel. So I'm really excited for that matchup, Emmett. I don't know if you have any preliminary thoughts there before we cut to break.
Oh man, I mean, I've got so much to say about Zach that I'll have to for all you guys during the game. But he is a formidable opponent who's haunted me ever since I started playing Scrabble, and I'm excited to see what he can do against one of the best players in the country in Rafi.
Yeah, that's a well put for sure. Couldn't have said it better myself. So we'll take a quick break, and we're going to cut back, switching over to the WoW division from the 2024 Word Cup from Albuquerque, New Mexico.